Wealth is not distributed properly. There are too many rich people who've got too much of the wealth, and there are too many poor people who haven't got enough. That's a fairly simple equation to work out. The poor need to get wealthier, and the wealthy need to get a bit poorer.
What are we doing here?
What we're doing here is we're at the TUC. This morning Keir Starmer's going to speak. We've had Anne-Marie Trevelyan's latest message that she's going to oppress railway workers and conscript us into helping the employer break her own strike. And we've got chaos at Westminster, so who knows what's going to happen next.
What does the chaos at Westminster feel like to your members?
Well, it feels like we've got a government that is completely out of control, that has lost the plot. We're waiting for a settlement to get serious negotiations on. The employers have told me on Friday they cannot make an offer because they've not met this Secretary of State, and therefore they cannot change their position. She gives them the mandate for what they can say and do at the negotiating table. She hasn't met with them. She's met with me, but not with the employers. And they have told me directly they've got no mandate to settle the dispute. And while that's going on, they're being paid £30 million a day every time we go on strike. So they've got no motivation and no means to settle the dispute.
You were quite hopeful when Anne-Marie first got in. What do you make of her now?
I'm always hopeful, but she's good cop, bad cop, but on two different sides of the one face. So she told us that we're a family, that we are all going to have a settlement, we've got to work together at the table, which is fine. And in the next week, she's going to conscript workers into going to work during lawful disputes, which is a complete suppression of human rights and the right to strike. I'm sure it's illegal. I think it's against the International Labour Convention. It's probably against the Human Rights Act. And we'll take them to court along with the TUC and all the other unions. And we want to support the British people. They cannot have their freedoms and privileges as free people suppressed in this way.
Would you say that they were trivialising strike action?
Well, they seem to be making it more serious. These events could have been resolved within a matter of weeks when we started, but they seem to be escalating these disputes all of the time through the hype we've had off Grant Shapps, who suddenly reappeared, having been sacked 6 weeks ago. He seemed to hype them up at every opportunity, castigating me and other trade union leaders, castigating our members. All we want is a square deal, and we know that the employers could give us a deal if they were allowed to negotiate it.
Just looking at all of the chaos that ensued last night, what does that mean, Westminster chaos, to your members, people right now who are struggling with their salaries? What does it mean to them?
Well, I think the country has the right to expect serious politicians. Even if you don't agree with everything that a particular government's doing, they've got to conduct themselves with a bit of professionalism and dignity. And what we're seeing is people scrabbling around, worrying about who's going to get a P45, worrying about who's going to get a red box next. And frankly, it could be all of them. They could all have a turn at being a minister the way it's going. But it's just a ridiculous situation. There is a clear difference now between the opposition and the government. We need a general election. They need to sort out who their leader is, the Conservatives. They need to put that leader in front of the public in an election, and they need to let us make the choice as the voting people of Britain about who we want to govern us.
Do you think that this government takes pensioners more seriously than workers?
Well, they have got this cliche that pensioners need to be looked after in a way that workers don't. But pensioners are workers as well. They're just living on their deferred wages. A lot of pensioners are angry about the way this country's governed. We want the triple lock to be enforced, but we want workers who are creating the wealth that pays those pensions to be treated properly as well. The problem in this country is that wealth is not distributed properly. There are too many rich people who've got too much of the wealth, and there are too many poor people who haven't got enough. That's a fairly simple equation to work out. The poor need to get wealthier, and the wealthy need to get a bit poorer, and then we'll have a more balanced society.
They've announced that they're ending the cap in April on energy bills. Have your members spoken to you about that at all?
Well, we haven't had a chance. Our members will be as worried as anyone else how they pay their bills. Most of our people have not had a pay rise for 3 years. That's part of what this dispute is about. But you've got to have a job to get a pay rise. So we want to secure their jobs with decent conditions and a decent pay deal. They could sort out the cap on energy bills by capping the profits through tax of the energy companies. If they were threatened with a massive tax, they could lower their prices and not depend on the market rate. We don't have to have a market rate for energy. We could have a controlled rate, and of course a publicly owned energy company would solve that, or a government that was willing to direct the energy companies about what they can charge, as we have done in previous times.
The Chancellor said he would look into windfall taxes if they were legitimately windfall, in his opinion. Do you think that rail profits are legitimately windfall?
Well, rail profits are. The rail companies are making £500 million last year. They were carrying no passengers and they took the subsidy off the state. They claim £16 billion was given to rail workers, which makes us chuckle. We did our work and the rail companies ran some trains, and for that, the subsidy that they were given was handed back to the shareholders, 500 million quid. Now, it could be a windfall tax, or we could just get rid of the privateers. We could have a publicly run railway that's in the interest of the people, in the interest of the passengers, the interest of the workers, and the economy and the climate. And we could have a really good integrated transport policy. But at the moment, we've got no transport policy because they've dropped the transport bill. So we've got a Secretary of State who's actually dropped the main bill, which is the bread and butter of her work, and we'll have nothing to do now for the rest of her term in office.
And you're going on strike again?
We're going on strike again at the beginning of November. That's regrettable. We don't want to do that. But we have to pursue the dispute. We have to keep the dispute alive. Network Rail are threatening imposition, threatening our members with redundancy, and saying that all their working conditions are going to be chopped up. And on the train operating companies, we've got no offer at all.
Just finally, could you describe this government in one word?
Chaos.